Now, if recent reports are true, it looks like Arsenal have decided to buy Benjamin Šeško over the Viktor Gyokeres, who was linked before, in what will be a monumental signing for the club. Now, in this video, we're going to look at why Arsenal made this decision and exactly what Benjamin Šeško is going to bring to the team if he is to join. So let's get into it. Now, if any of you saw the live stream I did the other day, we did speak about Benjamin Šeško and basically every single striker target, where I answered many of your questions in the comments. Now, if you want to see more of them, I will be doing them more over the next coming weeks, but I do think it is time to finally have a wrap-up video about Benjamin Šeško, especially with the news getting bigger and bigger every day. Now, many of you long-term subscribers will know that we did a video about Sesko over a year ago now, where we spoke about how he was the perfect striker for Arsenal and fit exactly the style that we were trying to implement within the team while still being a bit raw. Now, a year on, you would hope that he has progressed in many ways, and I think in some ways he has, but ultimately he is still the same player, and I still think the same question marks around him that I had back then are the same, but also the same benefits of getting him in will be there as well. So of course we're going to have a civil chat about him over Gyokeres, as it looks like the club have made that decision. Now, first of all, it's good to mention that Benjamin Šeško is one of the most unique wingers on the market, and I think even though the price is very expensive, there is clear reasons why that is the case. Now, when you think about a Benjamin Šeško's type striker, you do kind of lean to them sort of Hugo Ekitike and Alexander Isak profiles, although he is a little bit different to both of them players, but you can base level have the same sort of idea there. Straight away, Benjamin Šeško at 6'4.5", 6'4" overall, is one of the tallest strikers in the world, and that height obviously is going to be a massive factor in how he can contest aerial duels, which we know Arsenal really do care about, and we care about height and physicality within the team, but also potentially being that target man operator within the box. For Arsenal specifically, I think this is something they have definitely been looking at a long time, and Sesko's been one of the main people, because it is no secret Arsenal are very much entangled with wing play and putting the ball out wide in slower, more attacking phases, which then in a lot of the time we are just spamming crosses. You saw it against Southampton, you saw it against Newcastle to an extent, not as bad in that game, but basically Arsenal's only real idea of attacking, at least when someone like Havertz isn't in the team, is to just cross it in, and it's always been Arsenal's plan B, which I do like given some personnel that we can have on the pitch, but I think it has kind of gone a bit drawn out, because as much as Marino is not the worst in the air, he's very good there, he's not necessarily the most prolific when he actually gets his head on the ball. Now, straight away at Sesko's height, you expect him to be much better in these aerial situations, and despite him having this height, I will say that it isn't necessarily as clear as that. If you look at some of his stats around aerials, he wins a decent amount per game and gets in a decent amount, which you expect, but I think a lot of them aren't in meaningful positions, which I think can be down to how Leipzig play with him in the team. But looking at just him and how he plays with the ball, one of the big issues that I've highlighted with my analysis of him is that when he does get into these big contested headers in the air, he's not really strong enough a lot of the time to assert himself in these positions to win headers. When that ball gets onto his head, he is very good at directing it into the positions that he wants it to. However, getting it to his head can be a bit difficult sometimes, because if there is a physical defender who can jump as high as him or get to the same height as Sesko is at, they will just be able to head that ball away because they are more physical, which is something Sesko has to work on overall, but given the fact he has that height and has that natural power, he should be able to. And that also comes into play a little bit with some of the other great work he does around the pitch. Now, something that Sesko is very good at is pace, and he does have probably more pace than you would expect for someone of his height. He can receive the ball in central areas when he comes deeper, turn with that ball and run into the space in behind. He's been very good at this for a very long time with the ball, but also off the ball, making them runs in behind, which is something that Arsenal wholeheartedly need. And his pace is actually very quick, although it's not always as quick as you would want it to be. Now, what I mean by this is that he has these great bursts of pace where he really does have that effort to get in behind. There's definitely a certain level of him not really asserting his power the best, and sometimes he gets too tired in later parts of games and can't do them running you would want him to do. And also when he comes deeper to receive the ball so he can actually do this original turn or take the ball away, he is really acceptable to allowing players to nip in and get a little touch of the ball to win the ball off him. This overall, I would say, is probably the weakest part of his game, is that when he gets into these situations, he'll have his back to a player, and you expect with his height and his technical ability to be able to hold these players off, but he isn't the best at using his body when he's back to goal. There is sometimes that the defenders will just get around him, and they don't even have to be overly physical for him not really to be paying attention and them to nip the ball off him. And it's definitely something he will need to work on if he is going to come back deeper to help Arsenal in build-up, which I do expect sometimes will be used as well. But while I do mention that, I do have to make it clear that a guy that is 6'4.5", 6'5", you could argue, is got the dribbling level that he does is not normal. He takes on 1.3 successful take-ons per 90, which is in the top 11% of strikers in Europe, and takes on 0.34 successful take-ons, which lead to a shot on target. So he's usually only going past people in the sort of thought to have a shot, which puts him very high in Europe, which can be very good. And with all his take-on work being very good for his height, his dribbling level is very good. I look at him and I compare him a lot to people like Gyokeres, which we will get into. But something that I have really highlighted with Gyokeres when he's in Portuguese league is that the real thing I think is inflated is that dribbling level. Although when you look at some statistics, it looks like Gyokeres is a much better dribbler, going past people nearly twice per game and carrying the ball from deeper over 4 progressive as well. I do think that can be very league dependent. Not only obviously is there a lot of space there, but then you could argue in the Bundesliga there is as well. A lot of the time, Gyokeres doesn't really have the closest control ever. He sort of pushes that ball too far in front of him, but even has enough pace and strength to sort of push people out of the way in that league and dominate them physically, where he can just continually keep the ball. Sesko is not that physical. He is not someone that really benefits from physical contact right now, which will have to be developed, but his dribbling level has showed to be still very good. He's got a great close control. He's very quick with the ball, bringing it forward. Although being what is seen as quite a lanky player, his little in and out play of where he can come inside or outside of players to get a shot away is very key, and it pulls players out of position and creates things in them final third, which is definitely something Arsenal would have considered. Now with Sesko though, there is real benefits to him, and one of them is obviously, I think the main point of Arsenal needing a striker is ball striking ability. Now I will say Viktor Gyokeres in my eyes is one of the best ball strikers in Europe, and I think that he can score from anywhere. So if you do have questions about him against low blocks or in certain positions and certain roles without the space, they are fair enough, but I don't think you're just going to lose that finishing ability over time, which we did mention in our Gyokeres video a few weeks ago. Sesko doesn't have that sort of level, I think, consistently, and especially when it gets to one-on-ones, he's not very clinical. He makes a lot of mistakes, and his shot placement, I think, overall definitely needs to be improved on in the future. But when it comes to natural ball striking ability, he has shown he has that level. When you watch a combination of Sesko's goals and even a lot of the goals he has scored over the last couple of years, they are mostly insane strikes from really far away. Some of the goals that he has scored in the Bundesliga this season have been incredible, and he could be 30-35 yards out and smash a ball into the top corner with insane strength and power he gets from them deeper areas, which make him such a big threat. Although he's still not very prolific in them sort of central areas in the 6-yard box, he is still quite wasteful in front of goal and in the box. The fact he can score incredible screamers shows that he has that shooting level that you can develop into him. And you would think, given the fact he is so young, he's only 22 just now, it is going to take some time for his age to develop and him to actually get to them shooting ability. But you can see the overall platform there, which I think is the idea. Now, the last thing I want to mention from an attributes perspective is the passing. I think Sesko is actually a little bit more of a better passer than Gyokeres, even though the stats may not suggest that given the league and where they receive the ball. And I actually think where Sesko passing stats are quite bad is maybe a Leipzig problem overall. The places that he has to come to receive that ball are incredibly deep, and we spoke about the problems we said earlier about that. He's not used enough for his height and his technical ability to get players through, even though he has shown a lot of willingness to help players around him. I don't think his passing is that much of a drop-off to a Havertz or Gyokeres. In my eyes, when it scales to the same league, it could be quite similar, which is not something I particularly worry about with either of them players. Also, do we really need big passes? Just someone that can come back and help in them ways, but someone that can receive the ball and bring it upfield is probably more important. Now, that is what Sesko is kind of like as a player in a general term, but I do think I have to talk about how he is used for Leipzig. Now, Leipzig do use him in certain different ways, and I think some of them are better than others. One of them is this target forward type player where he is the guy that is the main outlet, where you can long kick the ball to from goal kicks, and he can head the ball down to allow the progressive players to run through. People like Xavi Simons, people like Nusa when they play, able to get into them positions. And although Leipzig are in the Bundesliga, which is a league which very much benefits from not low blocks, everyone's a bit more creative going forward, there's a lot more spaces that are there. I do think there's a certain level with them playing two up front where Sesko doesn't get the freedom to make movements around the box. Sometimes he has to come deeper to help these progressions happen. And I do think for Arsenal, as much as he can do that, and that will help, with someone like Zubamendi coming in and you think the central progression might be there a bit more, I don't know if that's going to be the way that they use him in the future. And I also don't really think they should do, because I think you want this guy closer to the goal more than anything, although this work out deeper is very good as well. And actually, one of the things that I don't like what he used by Leipzig is the fact that he drifts wide very often. You see this a lot, especially because they've got two strikers and they kind of have to hold that width sometimes, with the wing backs maybe having to defend. And I don't mind it from a longer goal kicks. We've seen people like Havertz do that because Raya prefers them passes into the wide stretches than the central ones. But I think for Sesko's sake, he needs to be more centrally with runners around him, an attacking midfielder, a winger coming inside a little bit more to help him and get Arsenal a little bit more dynamic in them ways. But let's talk about how he's going to be used for Arsenal. The number one thing that Arsenal need to do is keep this guy in a very structured role. I don't like him being used as a fluid guy who can run where he wants. Maybe if you had a Gyokeres, that would make a little bit more sense, I think. But I don't think for Sesko in his progression, that makes more sense. Make his job easy, make it simple for now, and then we can develop him in them ways. I think the number one thing he needs to be used to do is to run in behind. Now, this guy, we've mentioned the pace, but it is there in bucket loads. And he needs to be someone that stretches them centre-backs back and them defences back, where we can have a Roman 10 or maybe Rice and another midfielder roam into them central areas in between the defence and the midfield. Zubamendi's going to be pinging these passes into these central areas through the gaps, and we need players that aren't always Sesko to come back and pass it off. I want Sesko in the box, getting into them key areas. And that's another thing. When Arsenal have been forced down the wing from wing play, and I'm not saying we should just give up using our wingers, because obviously that makes no sense, he has to be someone that we look for in crosses and has to be in the box all the time. None of this Havertz coming back into the halfway line to send the wingers through and allow Odegaard or someone else to get into the box. Sesko has to be that number one player that we look for in them box areas, and we have to cross it in early to him as well. I want to see a left winger that really prefers crossing it and taking people on one-on-one with a big dribbler. Maybe someone like Nico Williams would work really well with Sesko, but that has to be where he is used within the box to give us space in them areas. And I do think on the break, he is going to be a key structure for Arsenal. I think Gyokeres was obviously that main guy that you look at as the break player who's going to be able to really push that pace and that ability to kind of shift a bit to the left, get into them one-on-one situations to get shots away. But Sesko has this ability from deeper on the break to receive the ball, run with it up the field, and then find a teammate on the wing. I think his dribbling level is really good, and his pace and power will be enough to get past some players. I think in the Prem it might be a little bit more difficult in some of the games that he's played, but I don't think it will take too long for him to adapt in that way. Just needs to get a bit more stronger, but we've got a pre-season for that. But we just need to have runners in behind at all points. If we have players running in behind and trusting Sesko with the ball to get these sort of chances off, then I do think his goal contributions will go up and the team will score more goals. It's not all about the striker, it's about the winger coming in. It's also about having more players going forward, forcing the issue, which we haven't done enough. We have played too conservative over the last couple of years, and I'm hoping that he will be able to do that and give them shackles off for a lot of the players around him, not only just himself. And I will say as well, Šeško is not the best presser in the world, but he's actually been taught very well at Salzburg and Leipzig to press very hard and pick and choose when he does it. Often we've seen him shadow mark the sort of middle defender or goalkeeper and sort of push up towards them. And I do think there's ways with a person like Odegaard, with people like Havertz around him, he will be taught in how to do that. And I don't think in any way he's going to be a liability from the pressing standpoint, especially with how smart he seems to pick things up, which I think is a key point. But overall, I think he will be a key player for Arsenal because of the natural striking ability he has from anywhere on the pitch, which is better than anyone we have in the team. He can shoot from long range. We can develop the short range ones, and if we get him in the box, give him loads of headers, I'm sure he will score a lot. And sometimes I will say his technical execution isn't going to be the best. We see this a lot with 6'5" players when they're developing and they have some sort of technical ability. Sometimes they are going to be a little bit wrong-footed and going to make mistakes. We saw it with Isaac all the time when he was young, so that completely is fine. And there is certain issues I have when in transition. I don't like his movement where he goes maybe to the wing or backs players up rather than being that real guy that takes authority and goes into the box. But that can all be coached, and I'm sure that he will learn that and get better anyway, so that is absolutely fine. And in comparison to Gyokeres, I think the reason why Sesko is coming in, you've got to think, is the age. 22 to 27 is a big age gap, even if the prices are quite similar. And I think more importantly, Sesko is that guy that fits the style. He's good in the air, he's good on the counter, and his link-up play from deeper back to goal is a little bit better than Gyokeres, but can be developed. All the flaws that Sesko has can be developed and get better, and I think with Gyokeres, you know the player you're going to get. I like Gyokeres. I had no problem with Gyokeres coming into the team, but there is fundamentally would have had to be some sort of system or change by Arsenal. Now, we spoke about in the video the other day how I want Arsenal to move a little bit more transitional based anyway, but Sesko is not a bad transitional based player, not as good as Gyokeres, but much younger and can still be developed in other ways against the low block, which Arsenal will have to do. I think there was question marks over Gyokeres' ability in these situations where he doesn't have that space and can't always move into that left half channel to get the ball. And in a sense, I do think Sesko could be the lesser risk because Gyokeres needs to perform now. I think in a sense, the club probably feel like if Sesko has a decent season this year, but then develops even more and gets better and better, they could probably accept that a little bit more, where Gyokeres needs to come in and score 25 goals and win us the league, which I think is a lot of pressure just for that striker to have, where I do think the left winger is also going to play a big fact in it. Now, like I said, I have no issue with Gyokeres coming in, but Benjamin Šeško is not a bad player. Don't just look at his goal stats. I think there's a lot under the hood which make him much more better than really the stats show. And I also think Leipzig this year have been an awful team, especially going forward. And he also doesn't need to play all the time. There's games where Havertz will still start up front and potentially another striker if we have that sort of cash. But ultimately, the Sesko or Gyokeres thing is very detailed in many ways. And obviously, it's a big discussion that we had on the live stream. So I would recommend go and watch that if you want to get a more deeper discussion. Now, later on today, after this video is coming out, we will be doing hopefully a stream where we talk about a lot of the wingers. And obviously, I'll be doing videos about them as well. So we move on to the next thing. But let me know what you guys think about Benjamin Šeško overall. I know a lot of people aren't exactly happy with it, and I get it because Gyokeres was seen as that man. But I do think Sesko, even in a first year, can do a good enough job. Help the team do much better than this year, at least. But thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you as always, and I'll see you in the next one.